Hello, everybody. Welcome back, rail fans and reactors. This time on another episode of Engines of Amtrak from AmtrakGuy365. This time covering, I could not say that for a second. Now covering the EMD F40PH, which is probably the most iconic locomotive Amtrak has ever used, right next to the P42DC Genesis series, at least as they immediately sprout to my mind. Without further ado, let's get started.
Hey everyone, AmtrakGuy365 here, and today on this edition of Engines of Amtrak, I'll be discussing the EMD F40PH. The F40PH needs almost no introduction, being one of the most famous and popular diesel locomotives in the United States.
Yep.
But to understand how it gained such a fan base and how some units are still running nearly 45 years later, understand how it
Honestly, that Rio Grande
most famous and popular diesel locomotives in the United States.
I already know about the Metro ones. They look great.
But to understand
Like this Rio Grande, decent but a little eye-catching. I've always been a sucker for stripes like that.
how it gained such a fan base and how some units are still running nearly 45 years later is what I'll be explaining today. To do that, we must go back to the year 1975. Amtrak's current fleet of inherited F and E units, the SDP-40F, along with the new P-30CH, started to show reliability problems.
Yeah, we saw
On top of
those
this,
went.
they weren't equipped with head-end power, or HEP for short. This created a predicament for Amtrak as their new replacement fleet of Amfleet coaches were being rolled out into service and were electrically powered by HEP. Amtrak went to EMD, who had already won a deal to build Amtrak a long-distance steam-heated engine, that being the SDP-40F, and a second, faster and shorter distance HEP-equipped locomotive. With that in place, EMD went back to their famous roots with a brand new F-Series locomotive. This would become known as the EMD F40PH. Dean Ellsworth was Amtrak's manager of the locomotive department and created the specifications required by the railroad. Its design was based off the successful EMD GP40-2 freight diesel, the main similarity being the engine, which was an EMD 645E3.
Which are insanely reliable.
The main similarity being the engine, which was an EMD 645E3. While passenger variants of the GP40 like the GP40TC and GP40P already existed, they weren't built for long distance or corridor service like Amtrak needed. Regarding technical specifications, the F stands for full width cowl body, the 40 for the model series, P for passenger gearing, and H for being equipped with head-end power. They're rated for a top speed of 103 miles per hour.
103 miles per hour. Damn, that's quick. And naturally, 645E3 16-cylinder, 3,000 or more horsepower, and you're good to go.
Being powered by an EMD 645E3 16-cylinder engine producing between 3,000 and 3,200 horsepower. They weigh in at 260,000 pounds. The F40 comes in at a length of 56 feet 2 inches, a width of 10 feet 7 inches, and a height of 15 feet 7.5 inches. They're equipped with head-end power using a Delco 500 to 800 kilowatt generator. Amtrak's F40PHs came equipped with either a Nathan K5LA or P5 series air horn. Here's a few samples.
Let's hear it. Marvelous. P5 Supremacy, let's go.
In May of 1975, Amtrak placed an order for 30 F40PHs, being numbered 200 to 229. These units were initially rated for 3,000 horsepower, whereas later units would be equipped with 3,200 horsepower. Regardless, these new F40s were planned for service on the San Diegan as well as unelectrified portions of the Northeast Corridor between New Haven, Connecticut and Boston, Massachusetts. The SDP-40Fs and P-30CHs would meanwhile continue long-distance service. The F40s would then be rolled out into service beginning April 9, 1976. However, two events eventually triggered a change in Amtrak's thought process.
What happened?
First was the sharply declining reliability, quality, and derailment issues of the SDP-40F, which you can learn about in Engines of Amtrak SDP-40F. Second was the extreme winter of 1976 to 77, which suspended many of Amtrak's routes and older steam-heated passenger equipment. Luckily, though, the F40s were available and put through their paces pulling Amfleet-equipped trains as the new coaches were quickly put on the rails. At the end of the winter season in 1977, Amtrak had a new plan. They adopted the F40PH as their new long-term locomotive power for all trains and began work with EMD to put this plan into action. The first step was trading in 40 SDP-40Fs to EMD in exchange for 132 F40PHRs numbered 230 to 361. These were F40s built using SDP-40F components like air compressors, electrical components, and they featured a larger fuel tank. Amtrak had realized the F40 was a do-it-all locomotive being suited for almost any kind of service required, whether it be long-distance trains through the mountains or fast-running corridor trains on flatlands. Other railroads like the Regional Transportation Authority, later known as Metra, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, Go Transit, Via Rail, among other groups, took notice of the F40's success and ordered their own units throughout the late 1970s and early 80s. By this point for Amtrak, the F40PH had become the poster boy for advertising and being heralded as the modern and prestigious diesel locomotive of their system.
Yeah, and I know it was everywhere. It even appeared in The Simpsons at least once or a few times.
Next time you're planning to fly somewhere, consider going with a carrier who has spent the last 7.5 years rebuilding its entire fleet. A fleet that now offers you some of the newest, most technologically advanced equipment in the world. Not surprisingly, it's also among the most comfortable. Next time, see what a thrill it is to fly on a train.
On the board, Amtrak.
Everyone who hates ads will be using this Chrome extension by 2025. I feel like I just found a Google cheat code. It's a Chrome extension called Pi that...
Additionally, the F40PH would be featured in several movies and other media, further cementing its notability and being the icon of Amtrak.
I've never seen this one. I told you.
Looks like some sort of a couch.
The F40s would affectionately be nicknamed Screamer by cruise and rail fans, as to supply electricity and climate control to the coaches, the prime mover would constantly need to run at 900 RPM, thus creating a deafening roaring noise.
Damn, 258 is filthy in this picture.
Screamer by cruise and rail fans, as to supply electricity and climate control to the coaches, the prime mover would constantly need to run at 900 RPM, thus creating a deafening roaring noise. By April 1990, Amtrak had amassed a fleet of 215 F40 locomotives after a purchase of 6 from Go Transit. Amtrak's units numbered 200 to 415 and eventually replaced the entire SDP-40F and P-30CH fleet. Other railroads like Via Rail had managed to replace an especially old fleet of locomotives, with their variant being the F40PH-2D. This version had desktop controls, ditch lights, and other Canadian-specific details. Furthermore, operators like Metra had a custom cab variant known as the F40PH.
Hold on, let's go back for a second.
This version had
would have been kind of neat if this version of the F40 had a Canadian wide cab. That'd probably look rather off on this kind of design, but I can't help but imagine it sometimes.
Desktop controls, ditch lights, and other Canadian-specific details. Furthermore, operators like Metra had a custom cab variant known as the F40PHM-2, MBTA with the lengthened F40PH-2C, and New Jersey Transit using the F40PH-2 CAT, named for its Caterpillar-built head-end power generator. Amtrak's units, despite 4 now being retired, were still providing excellent service across their system. As a matter of fact, Trains magazine estimated the average unit traveled 175,000 miles per year.
Damn.
Railroads like Norfolk Southern even began leasing out Amtrak F40s for freight runs during power shortages as well.
That they did. Very surprising.
On the flip side, though, many of Amtrak's units were around 15 years old.
But then again, it is NS. They have power shortages a lot. And I don't say that to knock on them, given how they're constantly the butt of derailment jokes and all that crap. But hey, they are not known for making the best decisions when it comes to management. But hey, I'm just glad that they're doing much better as of late.
On the flip side, though, many of Amtrak's units were around 15 years old, and Amtrak had begun thinking of yet another long-term replacement engine in the late 1980s into 1990. They wanted a more fuel-efficient, lightweight, do-it-all locomotive that could also provide third rail support in tunnels out east. This would culminate in the General Electric AMD 103, better known as the P40DC, or simply Genesis. They were 25% more powerful than the F40 with 4,000 horsepower, were 22% more fuel efficient than the F40, and had a single shell body design known as monocoque for a more streamlined aerodynamic appearance. On top of this, Genesis was a fully computerized locomotive, allowing it to maintain stable operations in the case of overheating, low oil pressure, and other situations. This also helped in the reliability department. Another note was Genesis was 14 inches shorter in height, allowing for ease of operation on the Northeast Corridor's antiquated clearances. Essentially, 2 Genesis locomotives could do the work of 3 F40s, thus reducing operating costs. Clearly, Genesis was the better choice for Amtrak. In short, Genesis does what EM don't.
Got one. Good
That's
one.
a Sega Genesis Nintendo console war joke.
What Nintendo?
Before Genesis was put to work, GE had developed the P32-8 BWH as a stopgap measure until the P40DC was ready. In doing that, the F40s and P32s spent a good amount of time working together. Eventually, though, the P40 was rolled into service beginning in 1993, and the F40 replacement process soon began. However, rather than scrapping all of their surplus F40PHs, Amtrak decided in 1996 up to 2007 to convert 21 units into non-powered control units, or NPCU for short. This involved removing the prime mover, traction motors, alternators, among other parts, and installed a roll-up door on the side for baggage car service. A functional control stand was left in place, though, to allow for push-pull operations. The NPCUs earned themselves the nickname Cabbage, a combination of the words cab and baggage. The first unit to get this treatment was number 368, now numbered 90368. Despite this, some F40s continued service in the Northeast on trains like the Maple Leaf up until around the summer of 2002. This would finally mark the end of common revenue runs for Amtrak's EMD F40PH. Even with the F40PH retired, holstering 26 years of service as powered units, many Amtrak F40s still exist in some kind of service, whether that be as an NPCU on corridor trains or even in revenue service, rebuilt on other railroads as far as Canada and Panama. F40PH number 406 notably retained its original road number and lacked a roll-up baggage door even when converted to an NPCU in 2011. After that, it was used on Amtrak's touring exhibit train. Finally, it resumed NPCU life on the Downeaster, but as of October 2020, is in the Albany, New York shops for upgrades. Regardless of individual thoughts and opinions on the F40, its legacy and impact is undeniable. From getting Amtrak out of a power rut in the 1970s, to proving itself as one of America's most successful passenger locomotives still in revenue service today. It cemented itself as the flagship locomotive for Amtrak, became an internet meme throughout the mid to late 2000s, and to this day is revered as a fan-favorite locomotive amongst many rail fans, including myself. I mean, my icon clearly shows that, you know what I'm saying?
No kidding.
As recent as October 2020, F40PHR number 281 was powered up for excursions for the first time in 5 years at the California State Railroad Museum, retaining its original Phase 3 colors. Number 231 is also being restored by dynamic rail preservation. While other F40s haven't been as lucky, with many being scrapped or held in storage yards for parts, an overwhelming majority are still around today. Amtrak's F40s witnessed nearly all of the railroad's paint schemes and have outlived much of the railroad's roster. Railroads like Metra, MBTA, Via Rail, among many others, all greatly continue the F40 legacy, providing their units with consistent upgrades and maintenance, all to much success.
And even gaining ditch lights, which they look pretty good on these things, but at the same time, I prefer how they look without them.
F40 legacy, providing their units with consistent upgrades and maintenance, all to much success.
Amtrak.
The F40 series has mastered 44 years of service as of 2020, and it certainly seems like there's more to come. The EMD F40PH will always remain and is still part of the history book of Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation.
Undoubtedly.
Thanks for watching this remade episode of Engines of Amtrak. Thanks a ton as usual to everyone who submitted.
Man, that was great. Obviously, the impact of the F40PH is crazy as is, and they'll always be remembered. But as always, everyone, let me know what you think down below. Original video will be in the description, as I always say. Take care, everybody, and I'll see y'all next time.